Programming to bring you the latest on Chinese President Xi Jinping's trip to Greece. The first state visit by Chinese head of state in 11 years. Take a look at these live pictures coming out of Athens, the Greek capital. On the president's agenda there, he will be paying a visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier. He will also be meeting with both Prime Minister and President of Greece. We'll keep you updated on all the latest details there on Chinese President Xi Jinping's official state visit there to Greece. Here's more about the tomb of the unknown soldier. It's a tradition, a custom for visiting heads of state to begin their visits with a wreath-laying ceremony there, which President Xi will be doing in the company of Greek officials. The two sides have a lot on their agenda this time. They'll be focusing a lot of their time on talking trade and boosting economic ties between the two sides. If you're just joining us here on CGTN, you're looking at live pictures coming out of Athens, where Chinese President Xi Jinping is paying an official state visit. And as part of his trip there, he is paying a visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier in central Athens. The tomb of the unknown soldier is a war memorial dedicated to Greek soldiers who fought and lost their lives in battle. The memorial is located in Syntagma Square, which is also known as the heart of Athens. The monument there, as you can see in the pictures, took 3 years to complete, from 1930 to 1932, and is protected by members of Greece's presidential guard, the Evzones, who are known for their distinctive traditional uniforms. The tomb is a large limestone wall. The figure of a dead warrior is carved in the middle. He holds a circular shield in his left hand, while his right hand rests on the ground next to his spear. And on the left and right sides of the sculpture are inscriptions of phrases by the ancient Greek historian Thucydides. Just joining us here on CGTN, national anthems of China and Greece are being played as Chinese President Xi Jinping pays a visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier in central Athens as part of his official agenda there. And joining me now in the studio is our current affairs commentator, Victor Gao. Victor, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
As you can see, the official agenda there in Athens as Chinese president starts his trip there. This is his visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier. He'll be participating in a welcoming ceremony. He'll be meeting with both President and Prime Minister of Greece. Let's start with the general significance of this trip.
Well, this is an important visit by the Chinese president to Greece in the immediate aftermath of Greek leaders' visit to China. After all, Greece was one of the countries of honor attending the second China International Import-Expo.
Exactly.
And the Greek leader met with the Chinese leader in Shanghai, and the two got along very well. There were lots of reports about how the two countries pushed the economic and trade relations between the two countries. Therefore, very soon after the Greek leaders' visit to Shanghai, now the Chinese president is in Athens, as you mentioned, and there is a whole flurry of activities for this important state visit. And all indications are that the two countries and the two heads of states will be able to promote the progress of the bilateral relations to a new height. And we are very expecting to see all the reports coming out of the summit meeting.
There's a lot of good momentum going on at the moment, wouldn't you say? The Greek Prime Minister was just in Shanghai for the International Import Expo, and now President Xi is in Greece as the two sides really look to consolidate the good momentum and increase their trade ties. In terms of Chinese investment in Greece, in terms of bilateral trade relationship, where do the two countries stand right now?
Well, I think in all measurements, the China-Greek relations are very complementary to each other. Politically speaking, there is, I think, next to zero differences between the two countries. And economically speaking, trade-wise, for example, lots of complementarities. In China, there is great demand for Greek products, especially, for example, agricultural products. I understand the olive oil produced in Greece is high quality and very much liked by the Chinese consumers. And also, President Xi Jinping emphasized on several occasions that China can benefit a lot by participating in major infrastructure projects in Greece, including the port in the southern part of Greece. After all, that port in the southern part of Greece is the closest to the Suez Canal. Once the ships clear the Suez Canal, they can go to that Greek port and upload their goods onto railways and highways, which can be distributed to major destinations in Europe. Therefore, through huge investments by China in the Greek infrastructure and also in other respects, the China-Greek economic cooperation is blossoming, and there will be more major transactions, mostly involving Chinese investments in Greece.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the port of Piraeus, which has been frequently cited as a very successful example, a stellar example of cooperation between China and Greece. China's shipping giant COSCO invested in Piraeus port. It bought its majority stake a few years ago. So now it's not only just helping with the daily operations, it's also a majority stakeholder in the port. Why is this example, Chinese investment in Piraeus, so successful and hailed by both sides?
Well, I think the Chinese investments embodies a very important repositioning of that port. After all, Greece in itself is not a major industrialized economy to start with, and the internal demand for goods and services for the Greek market is actually quite limited. Therefore, that port in the southern part of Greece was actually, unfortunately, in decline. And when the Chinese companies moved in, they realized that they can actually turn that port into a transit hub. Mainly, they can upload a lot of and download a lot of goods and services from the Suez Canal, for example, and ship them to other destinations in Europe, not purely supplying for the demand in Greece. This would really involve a repositioning of the port and also a rethinking about how Greece can benefit from greater connectivity in Europe and also between Europe and Asia. This is the major Eurasian connectivity project, and this is very much part of the One Belt, One Road initiative, actually. Therefore, I think the Chinese investments in that southern port in Greece has turned Greece as a country into a major transportation hub in the One Belt, One Road initiative and in the BRI initiative. So I think this is really a mind-changing exercise, and other countries in Europe are following the situation very carefully. I understand, for example, there is another port in the southern tip of the Italian peninsula, very much eager to talk to the Chinese side to see whether China can do a very similar thing, to use the existing port, which is not very active at the moment, to become a transition port, a major connectivity hub for shipments through the Italian peninsula all the way to Central Asia
Victor,
and
hold
Northern
that thought. We'll be circling back to that more. Let's shift our attention to these live pictures coming out of Athens, where Chinese President Xi Jinping is continuing with his official visit, state visit there to Greece. On his schedule today, meetings with both President and Prime Minister of Greece. He has just paid a visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier. Now he and his wife, Madam Peng Liyuan, are being welcomed. At a welcome ceremony before their meetings, respective meetings with Prime Minister and President of Greece. I believe he is in the company of his Greek counterpart, President Prokopios Pavlopoulos. A red carpet welcoming ceremony there, rolling for visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is the first state visit by Chinese head of state to Greece in 11 years. A full day there for the Chinese president. As we mentioned earlier, he will be meeting with senior Greek officials, topping their conversations, topping their agendas this time, trade and economic ties between the two sides. If you're just joining us here on CGTN, you're looking at live pictures coming out of the Greek capital, Athens, where a red carpet welcoming ceremony is underway for visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping. He is in the company of his Greek counterpart, President Prokopios Pavlopoulos. He will be meeting with both President and Prime Minister of Greece to talk about consolidating trade and economic ties between the two sides. The Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis was just in Shanghai for the second International Import Expo, where he expressed expectations for the Chinese president's upcoming trip. I'm joined here in the studio by our current affairs commentator, Victor Gao. Victor, as you look at those live pictures coming out of Athens there, what do you think will dominate their talks? Because President Xi will be meeting both Prime Minister and President. Will they continue to talk about trade and expanding their economic ties, which have seen good momentum, as we talked about?
I think this summit visit by the Chinese president to Greece will be a very happy occasion. Why? As I mentioned, the two countries have very close relations and very little, if not none, political differences at all. On major international occasions, the two countries have expressed understanding of each other and support for each other. Now, in terms of economic and trade relations, it has been blossoming over the past several years, especially after the 2008 international financial crisis. We all know Greece suffered a big knockdown in the financial crisis, and it actually triggered major European-based financial crisis. And for quite a few years, the international rating agency, for example, most of all wrote off Greece as if it's a disaster. However, even in the worst situation, China stood very firmly in supporting the Greece, and also without any preconditions. And I think the Greek government and the Greek people and the business community understood from what China did in the very difficult years in the Greek international financial crisis, what China is really standing for. And this paved the way for the very large-scale expansion of trade and economic relations between the two countries. Further, the two countries are very complementary. For example, there is a lot of Chinese tourists visiting Greece. Greece is promoting elderly care facilities in Greece, catering for the Chinese community. Property sales in Greece for the Chinese buyers is also on the pickup. For example, lots of Chinese students go to Greece to study, amazingly, in the college as well as the graduate studies, especially involving, for example, architecture, as I understand. And the demand in China for Greek agricultural products is also on the rise, especially high-quality agricultural products like olive oil, for example. So the two countries definitely can go further in promoting the trade and economic relations involving, for example, Chinese investments into Greece. And this happens at a time when there are other major economies which really want to build up walls against more trade. And the example of more trade and closer economic ties between China and Greece demonstrates that both countries can benefit and other countries can also benefit, and the greater connectivity between China and Greece can help all the other countries along the shipping line from the Chinese ports all the way to the southern port in Greece. So I think the Chinese president and the Greek counterparts will be very happy to explore other ways to further expand the economic relations and cooperation, both scope as well as the depth.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now. Greek President Prokopios Pavlopoulos will be holding a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two are now walking towards an indoor meeting venue after a welcome ceremony was rolled out for Chinese President Xi. They are expected to have in-depth talks on strengthening bilateral relations and jointly map out the blueprint for future cooperation. And upon arrival in Greece, Xi has already pointed out that China and Greece have maintained a high level of development in their relations over the recent years, as our current affairs commentator Victor Gao also talked about just now. And in recent years, China has become one of the biggest investors in Greece. According to data from China's Ministry of Commerce, total bilateral trade between China and Greece reached over $7 billion in 2018. So far, Chinese investment in Greece have exceeded $2 billion, providing over 3,000 direct jobs in Greece. Greek statistics show that Chinese investments mainly focus on infrastructure, energy, and real estate, among other fields. Victor, you talked about how in the immediate aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, what China's commitment and investment to Greece meant for the recovery of Greece. But even today, Greece continues to struggle with a national debt crisis, with a slow recovery of its economy, and with a very high unemployment rate, somewhere along the line of 17%. If my memory serves me, what will Chinese investment mean in today's Greece?
Well, I think first of all, by building up and strengthening infrastructure, it will help create more jobs. Why? Because the infrastructure, as I mentioned, both the southern port, for example, as well as all the connection railways and highways and all the other infrastructure facilities will help create jobs along the way, leading from the southern shores of Greece all the way to Balkans, for example, and further into Central Asia and other parts of Asia, Europe. So the jobs created will be quite significant. Further, the Chinese investments of all kinds, including individual personal investments as well as institutional investments, including, for example, tourist facilities and major power facilities, for example. And allow me to mention that many of these major infrastructure investment projects were turned down by European Union. Part of the reason was the so-called poor rating record for Greece. However, I think the Chinese companies actually decided to take more risks because they think there are better ways to control such risks. And they also believe that once you build up the infrastructure projects, once there will be greater productivity and greater connectivity, more jobs will be created and the stability can be promoted. Therefore, I think the Chinese investments in Greece over the past 10 years or so has really helped
Hold that thought,
the country
Victor.
to
We'll
recover.
talk more about that in just a minute. Now let's go live to our correspondent, Nawid Jurbarkil, in Athens, who has been following the Chinese president's trip there. Nawid, the two leaders, Chinese president and his Greek counterpart, have now headed indoors for their meeting. What more can you tell us? They're on the ground.
Yeah, busy day for President Xi. A few moments ago, as we saw from those live pictures, he laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier just above my left shoulder there. That's the Greek parliament you can see behind me. President Xi paying his respects at the War Memorial here in Athens. He will meet the Greek president, as you say, Prokopios Pavlopoulos. He'll also meet the Greek Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis. Now, Mr. Mitsotakis was in Shanghai last week for the China International Import Expo, signifying how important this relationship. Greece was the special guest of honor at that expo. In terms of what else is happening today on the agenda, President Xi will also head to Piraeus, the port in the south of Athens, which has been transformed really by Chinese investment. We went down there and spoke to the head of the port now, the Port Authority, COSCO Shipping, which said that throughput has risen by about 550% since it first got involved in the port in 2009. It's a very important project, not just for the Greeks, but for China as well, in its Belt and Road Initiative, which is why President Xi will be visiting it later today. He'll also have dinner with the president, we understand, following that. And then Monday, if that's about business, Tuesday will be about culture. Tomorrow, President Xi will also be visiting a museum here. You can probably see behind me the building behind me, steeped in history, as is the rest of this city of Athens and this country, which is something that President Xi paid homage to in his article ahead of his visit, where he paid tribute to the great civilizations, as he called it. Back to you.
Now, we do understand that the two sides will be making full advantage of this trip by the Chinese president and sign trade deals. What are some of the sectors we can likely expect trade deals in?
Yeah, well, first of all, ports is really where we're expecting major deals to be signed. Shipping as well. Greek has a rich history when it comes to shipping. The Greek Deputy Foreign Minister, who I sat down with in recent days, told me that about a quarter of ships around the world, he estimates, are owned by Greek shipping companies, and that's somewhere where Chinese companies could help out. At the moment, he says a lot of those ships are being renovated and built in China. He wants more jobs to be created here. And when it comes to jobs, the Piraeus port has been transformative. 8,000 jobs, the head of the Piraeus Port Authority told me that they've created here in Athens since it started, most of those going to Greeks as per EU regulations. Aside from ports and shipping, agriculture is another one. Greek saffron is one area where we could see on
now,
Chinese shelves pretty soon.
We're looking at some more live pictures coming in from Athens there. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Greek counterpart are getting ready for their meeting there. Just moments ago, a welcome ceremony was rolled out for the visiting Chinese president. Now they have headed indoors for their first meeting of the day. The Chinese president will be meeting with both the president and prime minister of Greece. We should be able to get a first look at how those meetings transpire there in the capital of Greece. It looks like the two delegations are now sitting down at the table, getting ready for their meeting. We also understand the two sides will make full use of this trip by the Chinese president and sign deals. Let's listen in.
Με αισθήματα ιδιαίτερης χαράς αλλά και ιδιαίτερης τιμής σας υποδέχομαι στην Αθήνα και στην Προεδρία της Δημοκρατίας, ανταποδίδοντας αυτή τη θερμή, λαμπρή φιλοξενία την οποία μου επιφυλάξατε πριν από 6 μήνες περίπου στο Πεκίνο, και σπέβδω να διευκρινίσω ότι την τιμή αυτή την επιφυλάξατε όχι στο πρόσωπό μου αλλά στην Ελλάδα, αναβαθμίζοντας τις σχέσεις μας πολύ περισσότερο από πριν και γενιάζοντας μια νέα περίοδο στις σχέσεις αυτές.
We started to build our strategic partnership between China and Greece.
Η επένδυση της Κόσκο μετέτρεψε την προηγούμενη σχέση μας σε μια πραγματικά στρατηγική εταιρική σχέση. Μεσολάβησε η δική μου επίσκεψη στο
This year marks the 70th anniversary of the PRC.
Πολύ επιτυχημένη επίσκεψη όπου είχαμε την τιμή να είμαστε μία από τις τιμόμενες χώρες, χάρη σε εσάς, χάρη στην πρωτοβουλία που είχατε πάρει όταν βρισκόμουν στο Πεκίνο. Και βέβαια η σημερινή
And
επίσκεψη, η
also,
οποία, όπως
China
είπα,
has made great
εξορραγίζει αυτή τη
achievements
νέα
in the
περίοδο
past
των
7
σχέσεων.
decades.
70 χρόνια πια από την ίδρυση της λαϊκής δημοκρατίας της Κίνας. Ένα έτος σημαντικό, το οποίο κάνει και τον απολογισμό των μεγάλων προσπαθειών που έχουν γίνει στην Κίνα.
Internationally, China is playing a bigger role.
Η Κίνα έχει κάνει τεράστιες πρόοδους και αυτές οφείλονται εν πολλοίς στη δική σας φυσιογνωμία, στη δική σας σοφία, στα δικά σας προσόντα ως ηγέτη και πολιτικού. Γιατί μέσα από τις δικές σας προσπάθειες και τη δική σας καθοδήγηση η Κίνα έχει κάνει αλματώδεις πρόοδους και σε ό,τι αφορά το εσωτερικό της και σε ό,τι αφορά το εξωτερικό. Στο εσωτερικό της δεν μπορεί να
And in the
μείνει
fields of
κανείς.
economy and politics and culture, China has come a long way.
Που κάνατε και κάνετε να αναβαθμίσετε το επίπεδο των συμπολιτών σας. Εκατομμύρια πλέον Κινέζοι
And on the
δεν έχουν
international
τα προβλήματα
stage,
που είχαν
China
και τους
is
κάτω από το όριο της φτώχειας.
growing its
Σήμερα
influence.
το επίπεδο τους έχει αναβαθμιστεί σημαντικά και αυτό είναι τεράστιο επίτευγμα. Πρόοδους τεράστιες έχετε κάνει στην οικονομία, στην παιδεία, στην τεχνολογία και σε ό,τι αφορά το εξωτερικό.
China
και αυτό είναι
proposed the
πολύ
Belt
σημαντικό
and
για την
Road
Ελλάδα της Κίνας.
initiative.
Η Κίνα είναι πλέον σήμερα κατά γενική ομολογία παγκόσμιος παράγοντας στην οικονομία και ένας πραγματικά
And
μοχλός
that
ανάπτυξης
initiative
παγκοσμίου επίπεδου.
shortens the distance between China and Greece again.
Τεράστια σημασία προς αυτήν την κατεύθυνση έχει η πρωτοβουλία την οποία εσείς εμπνευστήκατε και την οποία καθοδηγείτε, ο νέος δρόμος του μεταξιού. Αυτός ο δρόμος, ο οποίος ό,τι αφορά εμάς τους Ευρωπαίους φέρνει την Κίνα πολύ πιο κοντά στην Δύση, στην Ευρώπη, στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση και στην Ευρώπη γενικότερα.
This initiative is connecting the whole world, for example, between China and Europe, and it brings us closer.
Το δρόμο του μεταξιού, πρωτοβουλία 17+1, που όπως είναι γνωστό αφορά τις χώρες της Κεντρικής και της Ανατολικής Ευρώπης, που επαναλαμβάνω όμως δεν είναι χωριστή, είναι συμπληρωματική συμφωνία. Χαίρομαι δε γιατί αυτό που συμφωνήσαμε στην Κίνα, το επαναλαμβάνουμε και εδώ, το ότι όλη μας η συνεργασία, όπως και η συνεργασία σας με την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση που είναι πάντα ευπρόσδεκτη, γίνεται αποκλειστικά πάνω στη βάση του διεθνούς και του ευρωπαϊκού δικαίου. Ό,τι συμφωνούμε, ό,τι
Now, in Europe, including Greece, we will do whatever we can to support the Belt and Road initiative and bring China and Europe ever more closer.
Το ευρωπαϊκό δίκαιο και το ευρωπαϊκό κεκτημένο είναι δυνατόν να πράξουμε, αλλά ό,τι μας επιτρέπει αυτό το δίκαιο και αυτό το κεκτημένο, να είστε βέβαιος και θα το πράξουμε για να μπορέσουμε να ανοίξουμε στο μέτρο που μας αναλογεί το δρόμο της Κίνας προς την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση.
Europe also needs to play an active role in the implementation of the BRI initiative to be an example.
Ότι είστε υπέρ μιας ισχυρής Ευρώπης, υπέρ ενός ενοποιημένου ευρωπαϊκού οικοδομήματος, το οποίο θα επιτρέψει στην Ευρώπη να παίξει το δικό της πλανητικό ρόλο. Γιατί, κύριε Πρόεδρε, συμφωνήσαμε ότι η Ευρώπη έχει να παίξει έναν πλανητικό ρόλο. Και ο ρόλος αυτός είναι εκείνος που αφορά την υπεράσπιση.
China and Greece shares a lot in common in history and in culture.
Της δικαιοσύνης και ιδίως της κοινωνικής δικαιοσύνης. Όλα αυτά, κύριε Πρόεδρε, τα στηρίζουμε αυτή τη συνεργασία.
We also share the same visions and philosophies.
Είναι οι πολιτισμοί μας. Δύο πανάρχιοι πολιτισμοί, με κοινές αρχές, κοινές αξίες. Μπορεί να διαφέρουν σε ορισμένα πράγματα, πάντως οι διαφορές τους.
Now we need more exchanges and communication in this current era.
Συγκυρώνουν και τους ενώνουν. Και αναφέρω τούτο για το τι σημαίνει κοινότητα πνεύματος πολιτισμού μας. Στο κέντρο είναι ο άνθρωπος. Και όπως ο Αριστοτέλης είχε πει, ο άνθρωπος μόνο σε κοινωνία μπορεί να ζήσει, είναι κοινωνικό. Άλλο τόσο και οι κοινωνίες που χτίζουμε είναι κοινωνίες που έχουν την τάση να επικοινωνούν μεταξύ τους. Το γονίδιο, ας το πω έτσι, του ανθρώπου είναι κοινωνικό, αλλά και το γονίδιο των κοινωνιών που φτιάχνει ο άνθρωπος είναι επίσης να επικοινωνούν.
The Chinese and the Greek civilizations are the bridges between us. We have deeper mutual trust, and our exchanges will be more frequent on the basis of the shared culture and civilizations.
Οι Έλληνες και οι Κινέζοι, το γνωρίζουμε καλά, δεν συγκρούονται. Οι πραγματικοί πολιτισμοί διαλέγονται μεταξύ τους. Οι πραγματικοί πολιτισμοί χτίζουν γέφυρες επικοινωνίας και γκρεμίζουν τείχη διαχωρισμών. Και πάλι καλώς ορίσατε στην Αθήνα και στην Προεδρία της Δημοκρατίας. Εμείς οι Έλληνες χαιρόμαστε που υπό τους όρους και τις προϋποθέσεις που είπα προηγουμένως, δηλαδή το διεθνές και το ευρωπαϊκό δίκαιο,
we cannot reflect our bilateral relationship through the number of population or the land area.
Και το λέω αυτό, κύριε Πρόεδρε, γιατί άλλο ένα κοινό σημείο των πολιτισμών μας είναι τούτο που δείχνει και το μεγαλείο τους. Η σχέση μας, η συμπόρευσή μας δεν μετριέται με την έκταση του εδάφους και με τον αριθμό των κατοίκων. Μετριέται μόνο με τη δύναμη της ψυχής των λαών να ανταποκρίνονται στο κάλεσμα της ιστορίας. Καλώς ορίσατε.
Your esteemed President Pavlopoulos,
Εξοχότατε, κύριε Πρόεδρε, κύριε Παυλόπουλε,
it's very honor for me to be invited here
που
by
επισκέπτομαι την Αθήνα μετά από
Mr.
πρόσκλησή
President.
σας.
And I sincerely want to thank you for your warm arrangements and considerate receiving of our delegation.
Σε μένα προσωπικά και την αντιπροσωπεία. Οι χώρες μας είναι
Dear Mr. President,
κληρονόμοι δύο μεγάλου
the ancient Greece was the source of the Greek civilization. 2,500 years ago, in arts, philosophies, natural sciences, Greece stood out, contributing to the prosperous civilization of mankind. And also at that same time, China was in the period of the spring and autumn and the warring states. We also had a boom of civilizational development. This time, I bring with me my sincere expectations about our future. China and Greece carry forward those ancient civilizations, and with our industrious efforts, we have realized modernization. Yesterday night, when I was staying in my hotel, I could feel personally the charm of ancient Greek civilization. Even I felt that from the perspective of an Oriental mindset. The two countries share profound historical bases, and we cherish the modern values of those ancient civilizations. Exchanges are paramount and the natural call for the development of civilizations, and we can keep nourish those civilizations and cultures with such mutual exchanges. As has been said by an ancient Greek philosopher, Heraclitus, for everything, it remains in changes. And now we must push forward such exchanges continuously so that in this new era, the two ancient Greek civilizations could emit new charms. Thank you.
You're looking at live pictures coming out of Athens, Greece, where visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping is in a meeting with his Greek counterpart, President Pavlopoulos. Let me continue my conversation here with my guest, Victor Gao, in our Beijing studio. We were able to hear that conversation that at the start of the meeting between the two leaders, and it was friendly. You could hear the Chinese president talk about how our minds think alike when he referenced remarks made by his Greek counterpart there. They both talked about civilizations because that's what China and Greece are both known for. Victor, how do you think that these old ancient civilizations, when they talk to each other, when they make dialogue, and when in today's world that they try to increase their ties, how do civilizations help?
Well, it seems that in their summit meeting, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Greek counterpart, the Greek president, sounded both like philosophers as well as historians. They traced their country's civilization all the way back to more than 2,500 years ago, and both emphasized the origins of their civilization and the importance of the Greek civilization, which eventually gave rise to the European civilization as a whole. So basically, Greece is the starting point of the European civilization and the Western civilization as we understand it. And in Asia, especially in East Asia, China has the most ancient civilization, uninterrupted for more than 3,000 years. Some even say it's dating back all the way for 5,000 years. And I think it is because of these very ancient, very important cultural and historical heritages that both the Greek people and the Chinese people actually have a lot of substance in their thinking, in their philosophies, in their cultures, for example. And I think as of today, the Chinese people and the Greek people have a lot of common heritage to talk about and to benefit from. And I think the Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Greek President both emphasized this common heritage. And when the Greek President said, well, China is promoting the Belt and Road Initiative by expanding connectivities and infrastructures, this will bring China and Greece closer to each other. Yes, indeed, the two countries will be closer to each other, not only by enhanced connectivity, but also by their common knowledge of each other's cultural heritage and the civilizations. And going forward, I think China and Greece can really benefit from this very ancient and important civilizations and emphasize peace and cooperation as a common platform, not only for these two countries, but also for the world as a whole.
All right, Victor, I'll be circling back to you later in our program. But for now, let's take a look at this. Greece and China share two things in common: ancient history and cultural heritage. And in recent history, both countries have made major strides